You may have realized that being healthy feels different than it did in the past now that you're over 50. If you want to maximize your health potential but don't have time to read through overwhelming pages of Google links, this is the show for you. Welcome to Healthy Tips After 50. We love doing the research, finding solutions, talking to health experts, and learning what works and what doesn't. Now, your host. She spent the last 25 years dedicated to feeling her best and is here to share her best findings with you. Susan Rosen.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen. And my guest today is actually a return guest, which is very exciting. And her name is Mikelann Valterra. And Mikelann is a money coach. Is that the correct?
Okay. Yeah, some people say money coach, some people say financial coach, some people say financial therapist, but yeah, it's all
my goodness,
there.
She's all those things. Wow.
So many things.
So Mikelann, just kind of introduce yourself. You have a much better introduction than I would reading. Yeah.
I mean, who the heck am I? Yeah.
Yeah. And why did you want to be on my podcast?
Why did I want to be here? Yeah, these are good questions. So I am a money coach. So real quick, what that means, Susan, for some of your listeners that may not be familiar with it, it used to be that people could go to, a financial planner with investment questions, credit counselor with debt issues. Both of those are really great, important fields, but neither are really equipped to deal with the emotional side of money. So money coaching, and some people call it financial coaching, they're synonyms, they mean the same thing, arose to help people with a lot of that, like practical day-to-day finance. When people have questions like, how do I know if I can afford to go to Hawaii? And I'm getting stressed about paying for college and I still want to live my life. But I'd say one of the biggest things, Susan, is people use and work with money coaches when they're tired of being stressed about money and anxious about money. So probably the number one thing I hear when people call me is they're tired of not feeling in control of their finances. It's like, oh my gosh, it's such a big stressor for people. And a lot of the work is really practical. I work with people on let's learn how to manage cash flow, which boy, doesn't that sound boring, but it's what I think is more exciting. A way to say it is, what if we created a nourishing spending plan process where you could design the life that you want? Right. And how do we use money to really, first of all, how do you direct money so it goes where you want it to go, where you're in control of this money as opposed to it feeling like it was running the show, and I think part of why I was so excited about being on your podcast in particular is, you work with so many amazing women in transition and, women in midlife, women in 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And that's exactly who I work with too, right? I mean, there's that our demographic, and you and I are part of it, right? It's such an intense time of life. There's so much going on. And, what if money could calm down and use us, listen to that. How can we use money to create that next chapter, right? To create a life that we love with money. And there's just a lot of questions that come up for women in this time of life. So I'm like, all right, well, let's talk about it.
Yeah. Oh no, exactly. So that actually brings up a question from me, which is, excuse me. Sorry. That as you were saying, people, especially when they're in their 50s, have this kind of like, well, I'm not retired yet, and I still have some time ahead, but I still want to do this or that or whatever. So do you work also with women who are retired or getting ready to retire? And because there's all the things like with Medicare and Social Security and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. The answer is yes. I mean, it's interesting because, Yeah, it's such a great use of money coaching actually, because sometimes, when people retire, they're like, okay, I'll be okay according to the financial planners if, and then there's this big scary, if I don't spend more than X amount each year.
All
And then they're
right.
like,
Yeah.
how do I do that? And
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
happens when I
Yeah.
need to replace my car and I still want to
Exactly.
travel and I still want to do
Yes.
this and I still want to do that. And it's like, so sometimes when people feel like, okay, the money side has changed, I now know that, supposedly I'll be okay if I supposedly do this, but nobody tells you how to do that, right?
No.
And,
No.
I think that the other thing is there's so many emotions that come up when we move into that particular transition, right, of retirement. And part of it is some people feel like they've spent their whole lives building up, saving up to retire, and now suddenly we're spending it down. So that's
Yeah.
its own stressor. This is, technically
Yeah.
it's called the deaccumulation phase. Again, that
Oh,
sounds
okay. I
that
hadn't
sounds a
heard
little
that one.
boring.
Yeah.
But it is can be stressful, and yet this should be a wonderful, fun time of life where you feel like money is this just sacred tool that you're living
Yeah.
your best life. So, transition is a very big, normal transition where people seek out money coaches for sure, because they
Right.
really feel like they want to, do it well. And what I've seen a lot of people do is they actually hire a money coach a year or two before they retire
Oh,
to
that
make
makes sense.
sure that they
Yeah.
can and they're going to be
Right.
okay.
Right.
And they want the skill set. They want to know
Yes.
that when they hit it, they're going to be okay. And some people talk really practically, like, I want to make sure that I don't outspend my
I.
resources when I retire, which, hey, I get it. That's super important and practical. And some people know that it's a big emotional bundle of all sorts of things.
Mhm.
And they want to be able to be as graceful around money as they can
Mhm.
as they sail through this transition. So it's a wonderful, wonderful transition, but it is also loaded with so many emotions.
Oh my God. Yeah. 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 Well, and the other part that gets into that kind of complicates it is if you're part of a couple,
Hmm.
right? Are you
Right.
married or are you not married? Is there a house? Is there this? Is there that?
Yeah.
Because a lot of couples, us, me and my husband as well, um,
Hmm.
keep our finances separate
Hmm.
and always have.
Hmm.
And but then you own the house together, you do this together.
Yeah, it's
So it
never
gets kind of,
100% separate, right? Yeah.
no, no,
Yeah.
no, exactly. You know,
Yeah. Well, yeah, couples and money is its own special bailiwick, right? It's
yeah.
it's got a lot in it. And as I was
Hmm.
sharing with you before we started recording, I got
Right.
married about 2 months ago.
That's
And,
right.
not surprising, it's a second marriage, right? I'm in my
Uh-huh.
50s.
Uh-huh.
And so it all those things are up. Combining money, not
Yeah,
combining money. What are we
that's right.
combining? And is he gonna retire ahead of me, and what
Yeah.
does that mean, and how do we put
Yeah.
our lives together? And so it does
Yeah.
take a lot of really thoughtful conversations, and it brings up many, many things, including different money personalities and
Oh my God, yeah.
how you're different than perhaps the person's first spouse. That comes
Yeah.
that comes up a lot. you know and it's money
Uh-huh.
is such
Yeah.
a fertile, intimate
Yeah.
space for couples
Yeah.
to to talk about and share with, but there's no single way to do money together.
Hmm. Yes. Yes. No, exactly. Exactly. Unless you started as 20-year-olds together.
Right. And sometimes I do meet people that are the long time happy married, they've been together since they were in their 20s. Have you guys been together for a super long time?
Well, it has been now. Yeah, it's been a little over 30 years.
As they say,
Yeah.
time flies.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right. Right. I know.
Yeah.
I always say time flies when you're having fun and even when you're not.
Even when you're not, it does it regardless, right? Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, money and transitions, it's such a great subject. And I talked about it when I wrote my book.
Uh-huh.
The one that came out in October, Rise Above the Money Fog,
Uh-huh.
it looks at what money fog is, and we can talk about, kind of what that is if you'd like.
Yeah.
And it also talks about what happens when we go through different
Right.
transitions. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's the other thing, as I'm sure you well know, going into a second marriage, is that people bring in all of those experiences with them from the
mhm,
first time around, or the first
right,
couple. I mean, maybe
right.
you moved in with somebody, maybe you didn't get married, maybe, I mean, there's a lot of different variations,
It's so
right?
true, Yeah, I mean, sometimes people's first spouse was more of a spender
Mm,
than the next person
mm,
they marry, and that leaves a
mm.
huge mark on them when you are dealing for many years with someone who is
Yeah.
very different than you are. Let's say you're a saver and you're married to a spender, and then you remarry,
Yep.
and people naturally assume that the next person is going to be similar, but what if they're not, right? That's
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
or vice versa, or
Right.
maybe you were married to someone who was what I call an under earner, who never made enough money. And so you always had to compensate and be the one to, be the provider. And then you get married again, and the next person is a big time career person,
Hmm.
and they make lots of money. And so it's such a
Yeah.
different, there's so many different things because we're all very different around money.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's and we're human beings, which means that we're not consistent.
Right, exactly. And as I say, I reserve the right to change my mind. Yes, we
Right.
all change.
Over and over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and what's interesting about that is in midlife, a lot of people's basic money personality does go through a pretty big change, because many people, we tend to be very strongly motivated in the first half of our life, either by freedom, the desire to be free, or
Hmm.
the desire for security. And that, that's
Hmm.
roughly, we're like, we tend to be more spenders or more savers. That's a
Right.
little simplistic, but it's roughly there.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with either of those. The dilemma is when we go to the extreme. We're an extreme saver. So we're so frugal we don't spend enough money. Or
Yeah.
we're an extreme spender and we get into debt, right? So the edges are the problem, but there's nothing wrong with being somewhere in the middle around these.
Yeah.
But a
Yeah.
lot of times, after people turn 50 or somewhere around midlife, they balance out. So if I was always very much a saver, I become more and more interested in freedom and enjoying my money. And if I was always very much, hey, I want to do what I want when I want, now suddenly I'm more interested in security, right? So there is this
Mm.
natural place where we tend to reach for our opposite, which I know a lot of your listeners, if they know anything about psychology, we
Hmm.
do tend to balance out in the second half of our life psychologically and look at different strengths and weaknesses in a different way,
Hmm.
and that's true in money too.
Yeah. 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 Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely. And just kind of as an aside, I mean, we've been talking about, because you work mostly with women.
Hmm.
Um, is that just about everything you said is applicable to men?
Hmm.
You know,
Absolutely, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's not a woman only. It's not like women only are the ones who
No.
get emotional about things or do this, right?
No, no, yeah, no, I know. I'm glad you brought that up. Like, like for example, so when I wrote the book, can I talk about what money fog is
Yeah,
for a minute?
please, please.
So I titled the book Rise Above the Money Fog, the key to confidence, clarity, and control over your life. And so, money fog is when people are experiencing stress or anxiety from being vague around money. And that is absolutely just as applicable to men as it is to women. There's no gender in that, right? And so just kind of a couple of interesting questions for your listeners if they're going, well, wait, am I in a money fog? So here's three or four kind of questions they can ask themselves.
Uh-huh.
If you've ever felt frustrated and wondered, where did it all go? That could be a sign you're in a money fog. You're vague about your money. If you've ever felt fear or anxiety around money, that's usually a signpost that you're likely in a money fog. If you feel guilty about something that you spent, that's often a sign. On a practical side, Susan, when people don't know where they spend their money. That is money fog. And when they don't know how much money they need to earn to live the life they want to live, that's
Right.
a sign. And I would throw in, do you feel like money is a sacred tool to live your best life? And if you say, well, of course I do, then you're probably not in a fog. But many people, when I ask that, does money feel like it's a sacred tool to live your best life? They're like, what? No, like what on earth does that even mean? No, I don't feel good at all, right? So fog, money fog actually stands for something. FOG. So fog, the F stands for when we feel fearful when we think about our money. The O stands for when we feel overwhelmed when we think about our money. And the G stands for guilt when we feel guilty when we think about our money. And so they're signposts. And as you can tell, Susan, a lot of the money fog is about it's not only about being vague because we don't know, for example, how much money we spend or where money is going. It's even more so the feelings around being vague. It's when we feel that anxiety and stress from being vague. And what I know with like money fog is we often don't know how deep we have fog until we're out of it because it's like driving the car in the fog. Like I know where you are. You're in San Rafael, right? And so I went to grad school in the Bay Area,
Uh-huh.
Daly City, which is you and I
Oh yeah.
know is, down by the San
The
Francisco
other the
airport.
other end, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. South, right? So
Yeah.
I have never experienced fog in my entire life like I did when I would drive to the San Francisco airport, Daly City, South Bay area. That fog is so thick that the cities had to put in um, two signs, two stoplights for every stoplight to let you know a stoplight is coming up because the fog is so thick when it's there, not all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we all
Yeah.
know every single listener listening to you has probably been delayed flying into SFO for fog. I mean, it's like
Oh
fog
yeah.
hell, pardon my language.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but so the money fog is like that. Like when you're driving in a fog, you drive really slow. You don't have a lot of vision in your life. You're not spending a lot of
Right.
time thinking about where do you want to go in your life? What do you want to do? What's my purpose? No,
Right.
you're literally just trying to see the road right in front of your face. You're
Uh-huh.
you're trying
Uh-huh.
to keep from driving off the road.
Right.
And it
Or into
takes
somebody else.
yeah, exactly. It takes so much energy just to
Yeah.
drive very slow and careful. And so I think it's why I get excited about the topic of money fog is when people rise out of the money fog, they literally have their vision clear up
Mm.
and they
Mm.
start to see where they want to go in the next chapter of their life. And things become
Yeah.
possible they didn't even know because they couldn't see clearly.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting because while I'm listening to you, I'm thinking to myself, that's really how everything in our lives works. It's not
Mhm.
just money,
Right.
right? It's spouses, it's children, it's it's your job. Um, there's just your parents, especially you know when you get into your 50s and your parents start going downhill,
hmm hmm
um, which is also another big worry that a lot of people have. I
It
think
is
particularly
its
women.
own life transition. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's such a, I'm very, very, very close to my mom. And it's I think she and I joke her aging is harder on me sometimes than her, right? I don't like it, right? It's so,
That's
and
right.
that's such a kid
That's
thing,
right.
like when
Yes.
she stopped coloring her hair, I was so mad, right? It's her life. She gets to do whatever she wants to do. And I'm in my 50s. I'm having this emotional reaction that my mother's chosen to
Yeah.
stop coloring her hair. So, but it's yeah, it's
Oh,
it's all of these signposts of like,
yeah.
wait, I don't want that particular chapter to happen. And yet,
Right.
life is lifing along, and you don't want to miss the present and enjoying so many things that are right here while we're all
Hmm.
worried about the future.
Exactly. Exactly. And especially these days,
Hmm.
and it just, there's just so much to worry about,
Yeah,
and
well,
the
and part of
television
it
news makes
is,
sure
I
that
was
you
just gonna
know
say,
about every single one of them.
exactly. It's interesting when they do, the studies of happiness, and as you probably know, because I study the science of happiness, as they say,
Uh-huh.
um, and all the measures of happiness, particularly for Americans, have been going down, 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 and yet the external measures around, like healthcare and many, many things, actually aren't getting worse. And there's a lot of questions about why Americans are less and less happy. And there is no single answer, but one of them that comes up very commonly is the constant assault of news.
Mhm.
And of course, the younger you are, the more likely you are to be depressed, as all of us know, because of social media. And we know it.
Yes.
It's unequivocal. We
Yes.
all know it. And yet
Yeah.
it's not like until social
Yeah.
media is going away, right? So how do we handle that?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's what comes to mind is like, okay, social media, what's going to happen? What's going to come next?
Mhm.
Right? There's bound to be something else that's going to replace social media.
Mhm. Yeah,
You
I was
know.
reading Arthur C. Brooks wrote, he does a lot of work on the science of happiness, and
Mm.
he's the guy who wrote From Strength to Strength and just wrote a bestseller with Oprah on living your best
Ah.
life. Can't remember
Oh,
the name of
okay.
it. Build the Life You Want is the latest book. And one of his points
Right.
is make sure in social media you only follow people you're personally friends with, as
Thank
opposed to the
you.
lifestyles of people that you wish you had, because I see this with money a lot. With it's a
Yeah.
version of keeping up with the Joneses, right? I mean, the
Ah,
subject is
yes.
as old as time.
Yeah.
It's just that now we see what we think other people have that we don't have, whenever we pick up our phone. And so we have to be really careful about what we bring in to our consciousness around money, because a lot of money happiness is connected to feeling like we have enough, feeling satisfaction, this
Hmm.
core idea of sufficiency.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that's impacted by what we choose to, bring in and look at and read about.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, and I should say I agree with what you're saying, in that depending on the age that people are falling into, right?
Yeah.
It depends on what they're getting stressed by.
Yeah.
Um, and it's yeah, I personally, I would not want to be a person in my teenage or 20s right now. I'm awful glad I'm my age.
Yeah, I am too. I am too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot going on that young people are exposed to, for
Oh my
sure.
God. Yes. Yes. And a much higher slash different expectations,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
For what does success look like?
Yeah, my son's 24, and he's in a naval program on the East
Mm.
Coast in engineering. And
Uh-huh.
it's been fascinating for him because, I raised him in I'm in the Seattle area, and
Yeah.
we're in our own little bubble here in Seattle, and you don't tend to think about where you live because it's just where you live, right?
Right.
Well, now he's been in the Navy a couple of years, and he has been exposed to young men and young women from all over the United States,
Yeah, I
from
bet.
so many different socioeconomic backgrounds and
Uh-huh.
states and politics and religion. And his personality loves the variety. He's fascinated with, like, oh my gosh, so many different people and perspectives and
Uh-huh.
whatnot. But
Yeah.
it's I love that he is being exposed to so much. And now he comes back to Seattle, and it's very fun for people to ask him his thoughts and opinions on whatever the subject is. And of course, he's 24. He has many thoughts and opinions on all of these, but they're changing as he is being
That's right.
exposed
That's
to
right. Yeah.
such a wide, wide, wide
Yeah.
variety.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, exactly. Exactly. And the other thing that goes along with that with some people is that they're like, well, I don't like your views, so I'm not going to associate with you,
Hmm. Right.
you know.
Yeah, yeah. Good news is we
And
taught him not to go there, so he just sort of takes it in. But
uh-huh.
that a
Yeah,
lot is your upbringing. Can you tolerate other people's
that's
views?
right. That's
Yeah,
right. Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And because I've always had friends that were not, their politics and all that stuff was not aligned with mine at all. But they were
Hmm.
good people,
Yeah, well, yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I had friends that were so concerned about Xander going into the Navy and what he would be exposed to because of all
Oh
these other
no.
viewpoints,
Yeah.
and I never worried about it because I knew he could handle the variety,
Right.
the variety of it, and
Yeah.
speaking of, money transitions, he's on the opposite end of where you and I are, and it's been wild to watch him and his buddies go through their financial transitions.
I
They're
bet.
they're at the beginning of the empty nest, there they are
Hmm.
out of the nest, and
Yep.
watching him set up his first home, and watching him looking at, he'd love to get married, and look, I
Uh-huh.
mean, very much
Yeah.
in his own interesting, wild transition. And,
Yep.
lots of calls home that says, well, Mom, I know I was never super interested in this, but so how do mortgages work?
I love it. I love it.
Stuff
That must really be great for you.
yeah, it's always I could write a lot of funny books as he could, like being, because he's a very funny kid. He posts all sorts of funny memes of, being raised by a money coach. He's got these, little platitudes that I've handed him,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, I mean, we all have our different personalities, and you take your personality
That's
through
right.
whatever money transition
Yeah.
you're in, right? The
Yeah.
biggest transition that I see is divorce. Because I work with
Oh, I
so
bet.
many
Yeah.
women in, that kind of that what you and I are calling that kind of that midlife zone, right?
Yep. Yep.
40s, 50s, 60s. And one of the things that I wrote about in the book was that there's these three key questions that I often use, which they're going to sound really simple, but they are always knowing the answer to what can I afford? How much is enough? Which is a big question. How much is
Oh,
enough?
yes.
And what would be possible to do in my life? Like,
Hmm.
for example, would it be possible to go to grad school? Right. So they're
Hmm.
big
Hmm.
questions. They sound simple, but they're really big questions.
Yeah.
But what happens, Susan, is that we kind of get used to them and come to being able to answer them like, oh, I pretty much know what I can afford. I know I can go to Hawaii for a week, but probably not a month, that type of thing. We get used to answering these three questions
Hmm.
until a huge transition happens. And
Mm.
when you go through a big
Right.
transition, like I said, divorce is a big one, but it could also be, retirement, empty nesting, your kids are finally done with college, so you're done paying for all the big
Right.
payments,
Right.
lots of
Right.
big transitions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Or
the
the kids want to
answers
come home
to
again. Yeah. Hmm.
there's a big one, the boomerang, right?
Yep.
So the answers to those three questions change when people go through a
Absolutely.
transition, but it catches people off guard. Nobody thinks
Yeah.
about in the middle of whatever the transition is, particularly if it's not a planned one, that
Mm.
they're like, oh, wait, okay, what can I afford? How much is enough? And what would now be possible? All the answers to those have changed in all likelihood if you've gone through a big divorce. And so, or if you've gone through whatever the big transition is, right? And
Right.
so, really being able to stop and go, okay, that the answer to how much is enough is different. Like, for example, I had a client recently who finally, her youngest child finished college, and she's been making huge college tuition payments for, it feels like, for years.
Yeah.
So now she's done. As we say, the kids are off the family payroll. So
Uh-huh.
the question, how much is enough, is different. She doesn't need to make as much money as she used to make. She can step it back. She doesn't have to take as many contracts. She doesn't have to bill as many hours.
Mm.
She
Okay.
can have more time to herself.
Uh-huh.
But we had to really up and go, that question, how much is enough? The answer is different now that you're no
Yes.
longer paying these
Yes.
big college costs. So
Yeah.
it's just an example of
Yeah.
transitions bring these three questions to the forefront, and we've got to look at like, well, I think the answers might have changed.
Right. Right. Well, and in that particular situation, what came to mind for me was, okay, well, maybe if she's enjoying what she's doing, maybe
Hmm.
she keeps doing it at that level so she can do stuff for herself,
Totally. Well, that's what's fun to
right?
talk about, to have a really
Yeah.
conscious conversation, because you don't want to be working just to work. That's a symptom of being in the money fog. When people are in a money fog, some people overwork
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because they're in a money fog because they don't know how much is enough. So just keep
Mm-hmm.
working because more must be better. And I seem to be spending everything that I make. And so just keep going. Just put your
Yeah.
head down and work, work, work. Right. But if you're not in a money fog, you literally can answer the question, how much is enough? And then you get to go where you just went, which is, well, if I keep at this pace, maybe I retire early.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I use some of this money because I wanted to go to Europe for a month and now
Yeah.
I can put that together,
Right.
right? But
Yeah.
it's so different being in the driver's seat
Yes.
around your personal money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right. I mean, people get into their 50s and probably 60s because women started having babies a little bit later.
Right,
Um,
absolutely, yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's the kind of thing that, especially if you're married, you have to kind of sit down, right, and talk, figure out what you yourself want, and then sit down and talk.
Right, exactly. Well, and I do love money and couples because, as I said,
Uh-huh.
it's a very intimate space to be looking at what is the joint vision
Right.
of our life,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because some couples are so intimate in some ways and not in others. They may be sleeping together and having sex together, but not knowing what each other earns, right? So there's
Yeah.
pockets of intimacy, and it does
Yeah.
bring up a lot of really um, deeper subjects. And some
Uh-huh.
people want to go there, and some people say, I don't want to go there, and it's different for
Yeah.
everyone.
I was just looking at my internet thing doesn't seem to be as strong as usual. Strange.
I think we're okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, we are. I'm just usually it's got three things on it. And right now it's got only has two. Um, anyways, so okay. Is there anything else you want to throw out that you think we haven't really kind of talked about or
No, I think
it's important for people to
yeah.
think about?
Oh gosh, do you have 5 hours, Susan? Let's keep going. No. No, I think that's the big stuff. I mean, obviously I'm excited about the book. People can
Uh-huh.
grab it on Amazon.
Uh-huh.
What's fun, I'll hold it up for people that are visual. It's 100 pages. And how hard it was to write a short book. There's that famous Mark Twain quote that said, when he was writing a letter to his friend, he said, I'm sorry, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I had to write you a long one instead. I love that quote, right? Just because it's
Yeah.
like, ah. But I wrote it to actually have people read it. And so a shorter book,
Yeah,
people can sit down with a cup of
that's
coffee and
right.
enjoy it on a Saturday morning. So yeah, I would love people to, kind of grab their own copy. They can
Mhm.
get it anywhere. Most people get it on Amazon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that I know. Talk about a success.
Yes, exactly.
But we won't go there. Um, anyways, I will also put the title and everything in the show notes.
Yeah, no, I would love that. I think the last thing I'd say is I love working with women in midlife, as I know you do, right?
Hmm.
So it's like that wonderful I know you do insight coaching, which I just love
Yeah.
that. I love that. I love that. I love that word and that term. So what I would encourage listeners is, if they're curious about money coaching, just book a free discovery call with me. Go to the website. I mean, I've got clients who's in all over the United States. The website is Seattle Money Coach, because I'm in the Seattle area, Seattle Money
Right.
Coach. But if they go there, they can book a free discovery call, and we can talk about What's the number one thing that's keeping you from rising above the money fog? Because that's my
Hmm.
superpower,
Yeah.
and I'm just
Right.
so excited for people to live their best life.
Yeah. 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 I think the important message is that it's possible.
Oh, huge. It is so possible. It is 100% possible. And the air that you breathe on the other side out of the money fog is so free and clean. It feels so good.
Oh, well, on that note, everyone should feel just, happy and ready to go in getting their finances together. They're just going to be inundated with people.
Rise above the money fog together as a group. Yeah. No,
There you
it's wonderful.
go.
I love this work. Thank you so much for having me on and having me back. It is
Oh,
always
yeah.
so fun to, talk with you because we both just love working with women in this fertile, interesting, transitionary time of life. So thank you.
Yeah. 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 No, exactly. Exactly. And helping them to find the door and be able to open it.
Well said.
So, okay. Well, let me finish up in my usual, which I'm kind of out of practice here on, which is that neither of us are doctors. This is not medical advice, which we know. Um, and at some level, it's not really money advice as such because we've only just kind of done the very outside piece of it and not the real heavy stuff that you have to look at to really do something about your life.
Mhm.
But other than that, I will say that I will see everybody next week. And thank you for coming back on. It's been a
Thank you,
pleasure,
Susan. I
as
love it.
usual. Thanks.
This has been Healthy Tips After 50 with Susan Rosen. To stay on the cutting edge of the most effective health strategies, subscribe to this podcast and let us know what you thought of the show with a comment or like on iTunes. Visit healthytipsafter50.com for this episode's show notes, more resources, and free offers.